this computer. Thank you, Susie, my right-hand woman. I would forget everything.
There we go.
We're going to get started in just a minute. We're going to let everybody sort of join. I think we have about 50 people who registered, so we'll give it just a second. Just so all of you know, we're going to kick off today's call with Bubba and Amy, who are going to specifically talk about what went into raising close to $1 million on Kickstarter. Then we're going to transition into Sensi, who's going to talk about what she did to raise a little bit over 30,000, so that people can see that we don't want, it's really cool to like I want $1 million, but also if that intimidates you, we can like bring it down a notch as well. And then Mallory is having great success with a pre-sale. And so we're gonna kind of transition over to her, and that's what we're gonna focus on today. And I know that, you know, what a lot of you are looking for is to really figure out how to get money into the bank. Like everybody needs money now. That's the greatest need. And I just want to be really honest that there are no easy answers for this, and that there may not be lots of solutions to these problems. And this is something that like Mallory and Sensi and I are part of a Title IX Mover and Makers. Emily, who's on the call, is a part of it. Like these are conversations I'm having with other entrepreneurs that the challenges are so great and everyone's in so much need that it's really hard to think about like what are the exact things that you can do. So I hope that today you just maybe have some ideas, you know, you get some ideas, or maybe this is something that helps you in the future too. And then as always, like when the call's done and I send out the email, like any feedback that you have or any other topics you want to go over, maybe we even extend this into a part 2. So that's the plan for today. As you have questions, just please go ahead and type them into the chat, and I'll make sure that Bubba and Amy get the questions, and we'll just go ahead and start. So I just, Bubba, Amy, welcome. They are with Giver Gloves, and Giver launched a Kickstarting campaign this past year that raised nearly $1 million, and the top Kickstarter campaign for gloves ever in the history of the world. And probably you got some other awards for that as well. But I want the two of you, I'm going to unmute both of you right now. And if the two of you just want to, you know, give any more context or introduction, that would be great. And then we'll jump into some specific questions.
Take it away, Bubba.
Perfect. Well, first and foremost, really appreciate the opportunity to chat with everybody and hope to be as articulate and helpful as we can be. Again, I'm Bubba Albrecht. We started Giver about 8 years ago, so it's been a really long road. I think the cliche of like, oh, an overnight success that was 8 years in the making really applies, and is a big takeaway for especially crowdfunding or any kind of fundraising, that it can appear as if it just kind of happened, but we've been working really hard and had a ton of people support over a very long period of time in order to get to where we're at today. When it comes to crowdfunding and Kickstarter specifically, this most recent campaign, there were a lot of factors that contributed, and I would say the biggest one being that this was our third campaign. So we've done 3 over the last 3.5 years. And I think that's a huge element that contributed towards credibility and overall momentum. And that's very similar, you know, with your customers. Like as your business starts when you have your first customer, and if they are, you know, psyched and hyped at what you're doing, that eventually will, you know, yield a second customer, and that word of mouth and kind of credibility with our customers through our website, as well as through crowdfunding, has definitely built momentum up over the years.
You want to add anything, Amy, before I jump into
Yeah.
a question?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm Amy. I'm the marketing advisor with Giver. The other hat that I wear is the co-founder of Garage Grown Gear, which is a online store and magazine that really spotlights small startup and cottage outdoor gear brands. So we have nearly 100 brands we work with through Garage Grown Gear. So I kind of can come at it from two perspectives here. But speaking specifically to my hat with Giver and also to Kickstarter specifically, I think one thing that Giver has done extremely well is put a ton of focus into the pre-campaign. So we launched in October. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bubba, but we started planning in earnest in January. So it's that ability to build momentum and hype. Our PR efforts started in earnest in June. Our Facebook ads started in earnest about 3 months before the campaign went live. So I think that tends to be the piece that I see people miss most often, is that pre-campaign aspect of things.
Mm-hmm.
Is it
Yeah,
possible? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to piggyback on that. A lot of it depends, I would say, on the goals for the campaign. But no matter if you're trying to raise $1,000 per project, or in our case, we were trying to raise $32,000, but we were hoping to go bigger than that. That the effort, the more you can put in the front side of the campaign, it's a very big mental shift versus, oh, if you build it, they will come. There are a lot of things that are distracting people's attention, and getting a feel for what you're presenting and it solving a problem ahead of time, and drumming up that support in advance of the campaign, as Amy mentioned, is the essential piece and building block for us that we not only focused on, but have continued to refine and build over the last 3 campaigns, and done everything we can to put all the energy into that launch. So I'd say it's the key takeaway.
So in just a minute, I'm gonna ask you a question. I'm gonna get to Stefani's now though. But so you've had, you definitely worked with a PR firm. There was money spent on email generation, like collecting leads, and then also just getting the word out. So Stefani here, if you're and some of this you may not feel comfortable answering, so you don't have to, but how much money did you spend on advertising for the pre-campaign?
I'm going to let Bubba answer that question, but I will say that we actually did the gritty in-house PR effort ourselves.
Oh, good to know. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say there's before answering that question, which I'll get to, anything that you can do on your own, the authenticity and especially connectivity to the campaign, there's so many things to try and cover the bases for, and it's exhausting, but the more that you can manage, or at least know how to run it before you get help, is essential. We're all crazy entrepreneurs, and like, this is when the crazy counts, because there's truly a million balls to juggle. But when it comes to the spending for the pre-campaign, I would say to go to our first campaign is probably the best one as far as like the initial effort of a campaign. I would say the final amount spent from like, oh, I think we're going to do a Kickstarter to launch day was probably between 10 and 12,000, which was more than we'd ever spent on anything. But that was after we really committed to the program and our partnerships and the efforts to get the pre-production samples in-house, and start building that email list, which ended up around 9,000 people. It was very expensive and was playing at a level that we had never played at before. And for that particular campaign, we were looking to raise 20,000, and we ended up right around 200, just over 240,000, which was mind blowing for sure. And it wasn't that it justified the expense of about 12,500, but that was the game changing risk that we were taking. And up to that point, we had spent never more than $500 for any advertising of any month. So it wasn't like, oh, we're just shelling out checks and cash left and right. It was an entire paradigm shift where everything of the companies was on the line, and anything I had saved at that point was like, it was all bet on that campaign. So it was not a casual maneuver.
And Stefania has a second question, but I'm going to ask that in just a minute. So I'll get to that. But Amy, do you want to touch on, like, what were the specific things that you did to prepare to launch from a marketing communication standpoint?
Yeah, so when I look at that pre-campaign period, I sort of look at 3 different avenues, buckets, for lack of a better word. One is your current community, and building that hype and that excitement with your current community. Those are the folks that are already your most loyal supporters. Those are the people that are going to evangelize, in this case, a Kickstarter. Those are the people that are going to evangelize anything for you. So the more you can kind of build that stoke, seed that excitement, get those people on board, kind of get them in the know in a certain sort of special way, that's, I kind of see as one of the cornerstones. When we're talking about the Facebook advertising specifically, that's kind of a different bucket, and that is going out and trying to find people who are likely going to be your supporters, but who don't have a current relationship with your brand. And so that's putting them into a funnel of Facebook ad that gets them on an email list, that gets them to try and opt in to being interested in this, so that then, and we call it like our VIP list, but that is sort of the list of people that you're hoping will be interested in this and will back on day one. And then sort of that third pillar of outreach is media, trying to figure, it's such a hit and miss when it comes to media. Sometimes you get the most amazing article in Outside Magazine, and sometimes you get nothing, but you have to just, and also kind of like building relationships with your community, building relationships with media is not a one email or a one phone call thing. It takes time, and you kind of build those relationships over time. But, I think one of the things on the very first campaign Giver launched, and then we're like, oh, we should probably reach out to media. And so that was definitely an area where we definitely refined for the following 2 campaigns, of actually having a very clear plan of who we wanted to reach out to, who we wanted to get samples to well in advance so that they could test it and write about it. And that was definitely something we refined on the second and third go around.
Yeah, and what you're saying is pretty consistent with, you can Google like guides to setting up a Kickstarter, and you can read, like Kickstarter produces a guide, Indiegogo has a guide. I encourage everyone, if you really want to launch any sort of crowdfunding campaign, to read through those guides, because what Amy is saying is detailed even more, but that's definitely consistent. And when we, and I want to, Sensi, I'm going to unmute you because I want your opinion on this next question too, since we've all of us have launched successful Kickstarting campaigns. And I think that this other question from Stefani is valuable, which is, where do you think a Kickstarter would stand in COVID times? So a lot of people on this call are probably thinking, could I use a Kickstarter to help me raise the capital that I need to make it through, which is very different from Kickstarter, Indiegogo,
GoFundMe.
Yeah, all of the platforms. That's different than I have a new product I'm going to launch, right? So I'm just curious what everybody's thoughts are on launching a campaign, I would say like in the next 8 weeks.
I think still what you have to think about during this time, and with any Kickstarter, Indiegogo campaign launch at all, is just the storytelling around it. One of our biggest reasons for doing the crowdfunding campaign was the story that we wanted to tell, which was switching all of our manufacturing over to be 100% recycled. So that sustainability piece was really key in why I did the campaign in the first place. And so right now, I think you can totally utilize it for communicating with your primary customers, and that will probably be your biggest group of supporters. But to Amy and Bubba's point, they spend a lot of time. I mean, look at January to October to launch to get it up and running, and no matter what, you are going to have to put a lot of time on the front end. And I would give yourself at least a month to if you're like, all right, I want to crowdfund to get me through this hard time, do it. But you've got to give yourself that buffer to make sure that you do it the right way and create the brand presence that you want to have, because that's going to live on. Your page is going to live on indefinitely. So that's kind of the one thing to be mindful of. But I think it's a prime opportunity to tell your story and just use that as another way to connect with your current customers.
Yeah, I completely agree that Kickstarter is an amazing vehicle for storytelling. And if I'm to kind of piggyback on what you said, if you're looking at that shorter turnaround for getting a Kickstarter up and running, it definitely can be done. It definitely has successfully been done. The thing I would be looking at that point is who is your current community. It's not that you won't get backers outside of that current community, but it's that your current community is the one that's going to be able to get you to where you need to go on a short turnaround time. And so the more you can kind of lean on that pillar.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with it. I think that there's this idea of like build it and they will come. That is not how any crowdfunding works. And the majority of the pledges that you get are going to be with people who have a connection with you. And so obviously the sooner that you can start and you have or plan and you've got really great email, like you've got this great funnel and people are getting to learn about the brand and they have this I'm spacing on the word, that's who's going to support you. Like being featured in the media won't result in as many pledges as those people who are already connected to the brand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If I can add just 2 points, I think it's a lot of times individually, it's easier for us to speak out to a larger audience that we don't know than having the hard ask of like our family and friends, because things get personal. And so it's like, oh, if I get something in a magazine, then it'll just happen. I think for each person or the creative team to connect with their friends and family. And I've always been surprised, but it's, I guess, less and less surprised that there's so much going on. It's difficult to gain anyone's attention for long enough. But the low-hanging fruit of your friends and family, to get them to support. And, if 50% of them do, that would be incredible. It isn't that they don't care. It's just that there's so much going on, but to really lean into those who know your story, even if you aren't telling it exactly that way through a campaign. So really lean on them. And then I think the other resource that I just point people towards is, all the campaigns that have ever been run on Indiegogo and Kickstarter are there. A lot of times the unique elements or attributes of a campaign are kind of between the lines, but whether we're in a pandemic or, just after the recession, there are campaigns that do unique things that you can review, and whether they're in your industry or field or, a very parallel company or completely different, it is worth its weight in gold to become familiar with, campaigns that were successful, not successful, what their kind of talking points were, how they were organized. It's a wealth of information. It does take time, but you should become an expert in previous campaigns that have been run. and not be hesitant to reach out to someone who's done a campaign that is similar, or, you know, if you ask 10 people and try and connect with them and 2 of them end up connecting, you can learn a ton. And I'd say the greatest value that we've had is a ton of creators who I was able to pick their brains before we launched our first one, and learn, but doing your homework ahead of time to know their campaigns and understand, or at least become as familiar as you can with what people have done in the past.
Yeah, I read this morning, I was doing some research, and I read that currently the number of Kickstarters is half as much as it was a year ago, but pledges are consistent. So there is this desire by people to support, right? And the price that, like, most people pledge $25. So last week we talked a lot about financial projections. You should have financial projections for your crowdfunding campaign too, to understand all the costs that go into running it, and then what's your cost of goods sold and your shipping and like all those different pieces. But people tend to give it 25, and that's an amount now that is still really appropriate, I think, to ask people of, and people are giving. They're not, there's less campaigns, but they haven't seen a drop off in support. Amy and Sensi, Bubba too, are there specific things that are like, that we haven't covered that are like, you must do this or do not do this when thinking about crowdfunding?
The video is super important. There's some sort of stat where a large percentage, I forget what it is, but a very large percentage of people watch the first minute of your video and then end after the first minute. So the video is important, and getting everything you really essentially want to say into the first minute is very important as well. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a high production video, like a high production value video. It just has to be a video that is authentic, that speaks to who you are and who your brand is and what your product is, entertaining, engaging, informative. It has to have those qualities. I mean, certainly you could go out and spend $5,000 or $10,000 on a video, but you don't have to in order to be successful. But you do have to put a lot of focus and intentionality into the video.
On that point, yeah, that's number one on my list as well, is to have an awesome video. You have to have one for sure, 100%. And then also have a well-designed page. As Bubba mentioned, the pages are going to be on the Kickstarter Indiegogo pages indefinitely. They never take down old pages. And so you want your page to be really in line with your brand and beautifully designed, and tell your story in a way that is appropriate, and you're going to be okay with it lasting a long time. And then reach out to everyone in your network and tell people you're going to do it. You can't just assume that people know, and really it is, especially in this time, utilizing your friends and your family and your current customer base. A lot of people on this call already have companies and they have current customer bases, and don't be afraid to say, hey guys, this is what we're doing, this is why we're launching it, this is why we're asking for help, and if you can give anything, please support us. That's totally appropriate and okay, and in fact necessary to do. I had one don't have too many offerings. I have a swimsuit company, and so I could have put, a bunch of different variants and all kinds of different colors and sizes. I think, no, you want to make it as simple for people to support you as possible. With the gloves, like a couple different glove packages. You don't have a million different offerings. It's keep it simple and don't distract with too many different variants on there.
Yeah.
Yep, I would reiterate all those, and I would say, given that the price point element, that $25, if you have the ability, I would say there's sensitivity towards, once you get above $50, there's a little more friction or resistance to make a pledge. But I think if you have a choice between a couple different routes to go under that 50, and if you can be 25, hovering around that, I think you'll see a much higher conversion rate. And then the simplest that you can make it, go that direction. Crowdfunding is becoming more and more familiar to people, but I mean, the number of times I've had phone calls and messages of like, hey, I don't understand this, and we've tried to keep it really simple, but go to the nth degree with simplicity.
Yeah. Did any of you work with a marketing agency in advance? Like there's a handful of them that will build landing pages, create the Facebook, Google ads to collect the emails, message individuals who've supported other campaigns that are similar. Did any of you work with any of those? And if you did, would you recommend them? And what are their names?
Mm-hmm. I can jump in there. We've worked with a group called Launch Boom, and we've worked with them for all 3 of our campaigns. And that was when I talked about our original around $12,500 spend for our first campaign. A great deal of that was advertising expenses, but then also the cost of bringing them on board. They were forming as we were getting, our campaign together. Again, 2016, and it's been awesome to see what they're capable of. 100%, like it's been an awesome partnership in the way that they've grown as we've grown, and we've continued to kind of build on our strengths while also allowing them to be at their best. And I would say you don't have to do it that way, but with our goals and what we were shooting for, it made sense. I always use the analogy of like, if you want to go out and catch a fish for dinner, you don't need to hire a guide. But if you want to go out and catch enough to feed the village, like you're going to have to get a professional who knows what they're doing. It all just depends on what your goal is. So we weren't trying to feed the whole village per se, but we said, why the hell not? We'll give it a shot. And we've learned a ton, and they're very an awesome group for sure.
Good to know. Sensi, what about you?
I was more on the take myself fishing route. I did hire a graphic designer to build out our page once again for branding, cohesion, and just to make it as professional as possible. But I didn't work with an advertising agency. I did my own ads, and our spend was pretty minimal. I think in total I spent probably $1,500. So big difference there in the amount of spending leading up to the campaign. And I did a lot of the boots on the ground work of PR outreach, Facebook ads, reaching out to family and friends. And so it really is all, what you can put into it and what your goals are. And for me, I was not about to feed the whole village there, but maybe we should have. Maybe we would have had better results. You don't know. But especially in this time, you guys don't bite off more than you're comfortable with.
Yeah, and it like to have a campaign that will raise nearly $1 million, you're going to spend money to make that happen. That's like, I think that's really important to know, that it takes a long time to get there. Like Bubba said, it's not this overnight thing, and you're going to spend a significant amount of money to do it. And that's because, that's using Kickstarter as a business model, and that's really smart. And then, Sensi and myself with Coalition, our last Kickstarter, I think we did like close to 60K. We didn't work with an agency. We did it ourselves. And we were really relying on our existing community. And that's really possible too. And for everybody who is out there, like, Kickstarter really is sort of like product focused, but Indiegogo is a great alternative, particularly if somebody's doing their first one and you're not looking to raise tens of thousands of dollars. Indiegogo has flexible amounts, so you don't have to reach your goal to get the money. It's definitely a step up from like a more like what's the personal website?
GoFundMe.
Yeah, GoFundMe. So Indiegogo is more on the business side, but it can be flexible. Nonprofits can be on Indiegogo. I think that a GoFundMe or Indiegogo would be really appropriate for a freelancer too, if it was for Indiegogo around a particular project that you wanted to launch, if you were a photographer or a writer. And so I think that it's important for everybody to really understand the different platforms and how they're different, and then figure out what is the best for you.
Yeah, totally. And the one more thing I want to say on that point is don't be overwhelmed with trying to hit $1 million. If we're talking about doing a crowdfunding campaign right now, it's okay to condense it and not shoot for the moon. Shoot for what you actually need in your business to get through this tough time, and set reasonable goals. And if you're feeling kind of overwhelmed with, what do I do? I'm applying for SBA, I'm applying for over here, I'm not quite sure. Maybe this is the most opportune time to be like, all right, I'm going to focus on building a rocketing crowdfunding campaign and show my product or my service to the world. There's also iFund Women. I don't know if we mentioned that one, but that's a female specific platform that's gotten a lot of traffic lately. iFund Women.
Does anyone in any of the parts? Oh, here we go, Raquel. Is there a benefit to using a name brand option such as Kickstarter or Indiegogo versus something like iFund Women, which may be a bit more focused on a specific demographic? Amy, Bubba, Sensi, do you have thoughts on going with a more well-known platform?
So the biggest advantage with Kickstarter is that millions of visitors hit that site every month. And so if it's kind of like PR, it may happen or may not, and who the heck knows. But if you get into Kickstarter's algorithms right, they'll start putting you in front of that huge and massive audience that they have. And so especially when you're going for the shoot for the moon type of campaign, that's a really compelling reason to be on Kickstarter. Otherwise, if you're mainly expecting the support to come from your own community, then I think any of them totally work.
I agree.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. After you.
I was just going to say the amount of exposure that Indiegogo and Kickstarter provide naturally, because they're so big, I think is a huge driver. I also looked at iFund Women, but ultimately I chose Indiegogo simply because there was more traffic to that website.
Yeah, and I would say if you have the ability to speak with someone who works within that organization, and just, it's kind of a 50-50 if you'll hear back from someone, but it doesn't hurt to wrap your head around what your goal is and be as realistic and honest with yourselves. And then just ask them, for their insight, like, hey, sell me on why this is a better platform than the other options that are out there, as well as looking at other creators on each of those platforms and connecting with them. And if I think gaining insights from those who have chosen one route or another is definitely helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any other questions from the community about crowdfunding? Because I think I might bring in Mallory to talk about a different way of funding, which is pre-sale. So I just want to see if any other questions pop in before we transition, or if any of the three of you have anything to add about crowdfunding.
I just want to add that I think this is much more of a bigger picture thought that does relate to crowdfunding or anything. It's a really, really tricky time for all of us right now, and everything's just changing under our feet constantly. And that's really unnerving for everyone. But the more you can sort of find that centered place, the more you're able to see those opportunities that are coming up. When society rifts like that, causes a lot of pain, but it also presents a lot of opportunity. Like your stat, Jen, about the funding not changing on Kickstarter. I'm like, whoa, let's get Kickstarter going right now, And so the more you can kind of see those opportunities in the margins that are happening, there are ways to navigate through this. It's just not straightforward ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are no easy answers right now, and who the fuck knows what it's going to be like in a month.
Totally.
That's, you know, in full transparency for us, we were going to launch a Kickstarter. I think I said like in June, and we postponed it because we just felt like it wasn't the right time, and we actually have to rework our message because for us, a Kickstarter going out now, and we've talked about this in week 1 with Amanda from Bold Brew, that your messaging has to be relevant to what people are experiencing right now and what you need, and to be you know, both in that video and then also in the landing page, the way that you ask people to come in and give has to be relatable and relevant. And so for us, we like pulled back and said, okay, we're going to rethink this. Like, we still think we have the product and the campaign that people will like, but we have to like rework all the messaging and really think about how we can be most successful with that.
Definitely. Yeah. Hitting the tone. I mean, I think especially being in marketing, like that's been my world, blowing up all my content calendars and starting fresh, because you got to find that tone right now.
Absolutely.
All right, to Mallory.
Yeah. So Mallory, Mallory's with Kind Apparel, and I'm unmuting her. And Mallory has not done crowdfunding, but she's actually launched a few pre-sales. So Mallory, I want to turn it over to you to talk about pre-sale as a different way to bring in money before you actually deliver a product. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, totally. I'm Mallory. I'm the founder of Kind Apparel, and we're in Missoula, Montana. We make super colorful, planet-friendly clothes for gals to get after it. And pre-sales have been a really big part of our business model lately. We've raised over $50,000. Well, not raised. We've sold over $50,000 worth of product in 2 pre-sales, selling one product, a pair of leggings. And it's been really a fantastic tool because we're able to leverage our current network of customers who are super stoked on what we do. It's a great way to launch a product to a very excited audience, run something in a sort of limited run, maybe not produce it in full later. And it's really a big tool. It's definitely a tool on many fronts. It's a tool for raising capital. It's a tool for meeting minimums with suppliers. It's a tool for understanding demand and figuring out how much to order of each size. And it's a big piece of the customer feedback loop for our brand, which has been super important. And the phrasing of it we are in the middle of one right now. We did our first in August, and we did a smaller one last month. That was not as successful for a number of reasons, but we're in one right now that has been our biggest yet. And it really is because of the messaging and just the way that we've been able to tweak it, because we are offering something exciting. It's a time when we all are facing challenges within our businesses. Everybody's strapped for cash. Everybody's asking for cash or figuring out a creative way to ask for cash. And so shifting that perspective a little bit for us was really huge, and phrasing it to the customer as here's an amazing thing that we're really excited about. Are you excited? Come be excited with us. When in actuality, it's like, we need some money. Can you help us out? Yeah. But that's not quite as sexy to sell.
No, it's not. So we had a couple metrics from the crowdfunding. So we learned about how much money people spent in advance, how long they planned for it, and size of the email list. Can you share any of that for like those 3 things that you think went into like why your pre-sale, which you're taking a pair of leggings and you're selling it in advance, and then you're going into production, and then you're shipping. So it's like a Kickstarter without the actual Kickstarter. There's not a video, there's not a Kickstarter page, but you're like, hey, we're going to do this thing, come support it. So let's talk about number of emails, amount you spend, and then what the amount of time you went in to prepare for it.
Yeah. So the spend, that's the great thing about pre-sales, super limited. We don't make anything here anymore, but I have a history of commercial sewing. So I have the equipment to be able to sew samples up really quickly that are perfect for photos. So that's super cheap, just the yardage and the printing. So that was $100 for samples and DIY photos. We did not run Facebook ads for our first one at all. We just started running Facebook ads yesterday. So far, we spent $10. So $10 on over 50,000. That's not too bad. Plus $100 for the samples. Email list currently is sitting at about 13,000. So not a huge amount of people, but a sizable amount. Instagram is really the biggest tool for us to leverage. And this pre-sale was in collaboration with an artist who has a larger audience than we do. So that's also very strategic and allows us to get on somebody else's stage and tell our story to a set of new fans. Yeah. What was the third metric?
How long you took to plan it.
Oh, that's another great thing. You can throw these things together really quickly. You kind of, instead of needing time to execute really well, it's kind of a done is better than perfect situation, because you're not working necessarily with other contributors or people who are supplying any sort of prize or perk. It's all done in-house, really, at least for us it was. We partnered on this last one with a yoga studio to offer 2 weeks of free yoga, because we're not delivering these products for 5 months, but which is a long time. But the turnaround time is pretty simple. If you have the ability to take a photo of a product or model a product in some way, it's pretty easy to throw it up, because we didn't do any exterior marketing aside from our normal marketing channels of social media and email marketing.
Yeah, so Amanda has a question, and I think you might have just answered it. The amount of time between your pre-sale and shipping, 5 months?
On this one, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Let's get into the messaging. So, not spending anything on Facebook ads, so it means you're really like talking to people through Instagram, through like that language, and through your emails. So what are you saying that is working?
It's honestly been a big experiment, because the first time around, it was really surprising. What we're saying is telling the story of a woman-owned business that has a business model that is very dependent on this type of selling, right? And so it's a lot of customer education, which has been really interesting. I would say, to add to the piece from earlier about time involved in this, what I did as a little bit of a strategy leading up to the second one was I began to open a conversation about manufacturing and what it's like to have a made in USA brand. And I started that in February. So kind of that slow buildup of like understanding what goes into something that way. I mean, we're asking people to drop $175 on this set. So it's not like an easy trigger to pull for everybody. So definitely there's a lot of customer education about our process, why we need this pre-sale, why our costs are so high, how the product is produced, and then just, it sounds kind of cheesy, but sharing our stoke. It's something that we're super excited about, and so we want to share why we're so excited about it and get customers stoked on it. I think what's been strategic about it for this go around is that right now, not a lot of us have exciting things on the horizon. Trips that we had are probably canceled, get-togethers, anything. Like, life is pretty flat right now. And so for people to get excited about getting something that's going to show up in their mailbox once we're on the other side of this, and something that they can look forward to, was really big. That was something that we heard over and over again in DMs and in order messages. And that, I think, timing wise, was a really awesome benefit of messaging.
Yeah. So I want to open this up also to Sensi and Amy and Bubba around the messaging. So like what is effective messaging? Because the pre-sale and the Kickstarter are so similar in the sense of like the message that you're communicating to your community. So any tips on the messaging and the language? I'm gonna unmute you guys.
Yeah, so I'll get to that question real quick. I just want to call out Mallory and the partnership she set up with this pre-sale, because I feel like that is something that as small business owners, we can all sort of easily overlook. But, the more we kind of link arms and band together for any sort of marketing campaign, the more reach it's going to have. And I really believe that a rising tide lifts all boats. And so rather than kind of being in your own bubble of fear, trying to look out and figure out who you can partner with, I think is a really good mindset to have right now. So good job, Mallory, on that. And then for the messaging, I think there's kind of two elements that go into that when I think about a Kickstarter campaign or anything. One, the product has to be just awesome, right? Like what you're selling has to just be something that people are like, heck yeah, I want that. Like, where do I hit the button? You know, there has to be something about your product that's just super cool. And then you buttress that with your story. Who are you? Why do why do I want to support this person? Because people love supporting real people with real stories, like someone they want to go have a beer or a cup of coffee with. Like when people are like, heck yeah, I just supported Mallory or Sensi or anyone, Baba. There's that feeling of like, not only am I getting this awesome product, but like I'm totally like supporting this cool small business. And so if you can marriage those two together, I think that's where that sweet spot of success is.
Yeah. Those are great. Bubba and I always cut each other off. Those are great points. I would definitely say you want to come at it with what your why is, why you're in business in the first place, and that can really create a lot of resonance with customers. As Mallory said, it's for girls who get after it, or as the Giver Gloves, it's actually product with a purpose. And so starting your pre-order your campaign with why you're doing it in the first place will really create a connection with your audience. And right now it is all about connection and supporting one another, and that's been kind of one of the positives of this, is really just finding other small businesses and brands that you resonate with and saying, good job, stay in it, stay strong, we're in this together.
You bet.
Customers feel that way too.
For sure. And I think the last point I'll throw in is by anchoring on your why and what you care about, and like knowing that for sure, it makes the communication and the language you use, the word choice you use, the pictures you use, makes all those decisions easier, because you're not thinking, okay, how are people going to interpret this? It's less of how can I appeal to everybody, and more of knowing your posse or your tribe or your crew and speaking to them and like doubling down on it and letting go of those who aren't connecting. And it makes things a lot easier to be able to just maintain that authentic and that authentic voice throughout, your emails, throughout your phone calls, throughout, your interactions, and just stay committed to that, because the customers and the people who love you right now love you for who you are and the way you talk about it, and seeing the genuine excitement that you have. And take 100 people who are really psyched over 1,000 who are meh any day of the week, and just lean into it. Yeah. Unfortunately, I have to go, but I just wanted to, Brandon, thank you. I'm doing mittens and branding right now, but sorry I had to cut off short, but such a treat to chat with you all. I hope it was helpful, and yeah, hang in there, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you, Baba. Appreciate you being here. Awesome.
You bet.
Take care.
See y'all.
See you. So Mallory, Amanda has a question for you specifically about the pre-sale, which is, do you run into any legal issues with that much time between your pre-sale and shipping by not using a platform like Kickstarter?
We have not. No, we're very clear in the distribution of marketing that this is not something that's being delivered right now. And also it's not like a binding contract. If a lot of time goes by or we're late to deliver, like our first pre-sale, we were 2 months late to deliver. If people want to cancel, that's totally legitimate. Out of 200 orders last time, we had 1 order cancel. So that's been pretty awesome. But yeah, it's just like any other web transaction for us. If somebody wants to cancel their order, we just refund them. No big deal. And yeah, try to make it super clear.
Awesome. Any more questions from the community about any of this stuff? Amy, can you talk about garage grown gear?
Yeah, absolutely. For days, but where to start? Um, yeah, I'm trying to think about how to best sort of funnel it. So as I said, Garage Grown Gear, we're a e-commerce store and an online magazine totally devoted to small startup and cottage outdoor gear brands. Our sweet spot is kind of in that ultralight backpacking space, that sort of aspirational through hiker. I mean, we certainly get real through hikers as well, but we certainly get a lot of momentum off of the aspiration of through hiking. That's a very big thing in our world right now. And yeah, so I started that 6 years ago. My business partner's in Minnesota, so I feel incredibly fortunate that we were already a cloud-based e-commerce business through this whole thing. Yeah, ask me a question, because I could go any number of directions talking about Garage Grown Gear.
I will, when I send out the recording of this, I'll make sure to put a link to it, and we'll put it in the Facebook group too. We have a few more questions from people about the fundraising topic, so I'm going to move into those. So we have 2 pending right now. Elizabeth is asking if any of you can address any fears that you have of putting out the wrong messaging now. Do you have fears about that? Do you think there's wrong messaging? Like, what's your thought on that?
Oh yeah, for sure. I've had fears around it because you don't want to be seen as insensitive. You don't want to just feel like you're pushing product down people's throats. But for me, it's just been, how can I really support my audience and try and talk to them? And because I have friends, obviously a lot of friends that follow me, and I just say, all right, I'm speaking to one person, and what exactly do I want to say to her? And that's how I show up in my brand voice. So it's really saying, hey, how are you guys doing, and truly caring about it, and still launching product in a way that we need to and that is in line with what's going on. But definitely I've had those fears, and I just kind of tune back into, all right, how can I really serve her? That's where I've been coming from.
Yeah, I love what you're doing about picturing someone specific to write to. I mean, I think that's a tactic I use all the time with a target. Like, I'll have a target audience mapped out, and then I'll name each of my people in my target audience, and I'm like, all right, this email is to Lauren. She's my 25-year-old who, and and I know what she drives, I know what she reads, I know what she drinks, I know how she thinks. Because the minute you can talk to someone, whether it's newsletter, social media, customer service, the minute you're going to have a real human interaction and further build that community. So I love what you're doing there. I think that there could be a tendency right now to sort of step away from marketing and messaging and telling your story, and actually right now is when you need to lean into it. But it needs to be done in a very genuine way. So on the giver side of things, we did this campaign 2 weeks ago called Unsung Heroes, and we basically sent a newsletter to our entire community that was just basically like, nominate someone who's an unsung hero. It can be for anything, but just nominate someone who's an unsung hero. And we got over 400 responses, 400 people who filled out our form, and we ended up giving 250 pairs of classic gloves away, sending out to those unsung heroes. And the response to that was like incredible. Like, people were just like, loved that we did that. And so, I mean, that wasn't necessarily a revenue generating activity, but it was a community caretaking activity. And so that those people that we interacted with, like, I've had people email us and they're like, I'm a giver customer for life now, right? Because we did something that was for our community, that was authentic to our community. On the Garage Grown Gear side of things, we did an Easter egg hunt on Sunday where we put like 12 discount codes throughout our site, and we did the product images as an Easter egg, and that thing like blew up. We like could not believe how much people loved the silly Easter egg hunt we did on our site, you know? And we did like a April Fool's email too. So the more you can just recognize that we're in this time where people want connection and provide that connection, then it's going to result in sales and growth and loyalty for your brand in the long run and the short run. I mean, that Easter egg hunt generated a hell of a lot of sales for us too in the process. So,
well, and Mallory, that was something that you were talking about on our call on Monday. So why don't you speak to that a little bit, Mallory, and then I'm going to get to this other question from Tanya, and then we're probably going to be out of time. But you want to talk about your community messaging?
Yeah, I think it's really important to avoid despair. And I fell into that trap kind of recently with a launch of a pre-sale that was sort of like an oh shit moment. Like, I need money. And as much as I tried to mask that, it wasn't masked very well. And ultimately, nobody wants to support a business owner who's not owning their own situation and not seeming confident in their ability to make it through this. We don't want to throw money at places that we think are going to just lose our money or not do anything cool with it. So I think anything that you can do to, even if that's how you're feeling, just avoid showing that to the public. I personally did a much better job of that this time, and it showed in sales. We did multiples of what we did on day one of our last pre-sale. Just because, yeah, if you don't believe in yourself, how the heck are you going to get other people to believe in what you're doing?
Yeah. Awesome. We have, so Tanya's question, are there concerns when putting out an idea on crowdfunding that your idea will be stolen by someone with the funds to get it going before you can raise the funds and finish your campaign?
Oh yeah, this is a big thing actually, where people in China cull the Kickstarter websites and actually start making the products. I have a friend that she does collapsible straws, and they have huge patent infringement. So I think it's certainly an issue, but you can't let that stop you getting your unique messaging out. You have an authentic voice, and your brand is obviously unique because you're behind it. And so you can't let that stop you. If it's something that needs to have a patent on it, you should make sure that you have all of your legal in place to protect yourself. Doesn't mean you're not going to have to spend a lot of money and time in court to defend that. So it's more just acknowledging this can happen. And I don't think that's a valid excuse to let it stop you from doing it, because you have a unique way of telling it, and your product is unique.
Yeah, agreed. Amy, do you want to respond to that at all?
I think Sensi covered it. That was exactly would have been my response too. So
awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it is 4:00, so our time is up today. I want to thank Sensi Graves from Sensi Graves Bikinis. I want to thank Mallory from Kind Apparel and Amy and Bubba from Giver Gloves. I'll send out their links in the follow-up email to this, where you'll also get the recording for this, and then a registration for next week's call. Thanks so much. Thank you for all of you for being here. And I guess we'll see you next week, because we're still staying at home. So remember, you don't have to use your inside voices, but we are inside. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
See you next time. Thanks.
Bye. You're the best.
Bye.
Bye.